this flash of silver. And he goes, bang, bang, bang. He's like, yeah, right, you love me. Bam!
When Shelley Malil showed up on screen in The 40-Year-Old Virgin, audiences laughed. He played one of Steve Carell's co-workers, the kind of role that made people smile and forget about him the moment the credits rolled. But away from the cameras, Malil wasn't harmless. He became infamous for something so brutal, so shocking, that it erased any trace of comedy from his name forever. This wasn't a Hollywood scandal about cheating or drugs. It was a crime scene, soaked in blood. And at the center of it all was Malil's ex-girlfriend, Kendra Beebe, a woman who barely survived one of the most vicious attacks in California's history. It all began with a relationship that quickly spiraled into obsession. Malil and Beebe met in 2007 through mutual friends. At first, things seemed promising. He was the funny actor with credits on shows like Scrubs and ER. She was a mother of two, smart, independent, and grounded. But their relationship soon became turbulent. Friends said Malil was jealous and possessive. Beebe tried to pull away, and by the summer of 2008, she had decided to move on. On the night of August 10th, 2008, she hosted a small barbecue at her home in San Marcos. Neighbors described it as relaxed, casual, kids playing in the yard, adults laughing over food and wine. But when Shelley Malil arrived uninvited, everything changed. Witnesses later testified that he looked tense, almost paranoid. He wanted to talk to Beebe, to work things out. But within minutes, words turned into violence. Malil grabbed a kitchen knife and launched into a frenzied attack. He stabbed her 23 times in total. The barbecue turned into chaos. Guests tried to pull Malil away as Beebe collapsed, bleeding out in her own backyard. In the panic, one friend shouted at him, "You're killing her." But Malil didn't stop until he was dragged off. He fled into the night, leaving Beebe gasping for life on the grass. The miracle was that she survived. Paramedics rushed her to the hospital, where she underwent emergency surgery. Doctors said she had lost nearly half her blood supply. A jugular vein had been narrowly missed, and her vocal cords were permanently damaged. For weeks, she lay in recovery, scarred both physically and emotionally. Meanwhile, police launched a manhunt. Less than 24 hours later, Malil was arrested at an Amtrak station in Oceanside. He told detectives he'd blacked out during the attack, claiming he never intended to kill her, but prosecutors weren't buying it. They said this wasn't a split-second outburst. It was a calculated attempt to silence a woman who dared to leave him. The 2010 trial was harrowing. Beebe, still carrying the scars, took the stand. She spoke softly, her voice forever changed, as she recounted the horror of that night. "I thought I was dying," she told the jury. She described feeling the knife puncture her body over and over again. She testified about seeing the look in Malil's eyes, a man she once trusted, now trying to erase her existence. Prosecutors laid out the evidence: witness testimony from her friends, bloody crime scene photos, and Malil's own confession that he had lost control. They argued that his jealousy boiled over into attempted murder. The jury agreed. He was convicted of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. The judge's words at sentencing were scathing. Malil was given life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 12 years. For Kendra Beebe, it felt like justice, at least for a while. But in 2018, just 9 years into his sentence, Malil went before a parole board. To Beebe's shock, he was granted release. She spoke out publicly, furious at the system that allowed the man who tried to end her life to walk free so soon. In interviews, she warned other women about the dangers of ignoring red flags in relationships. "I lived through something most people don't survive," she said, "and now I have to live knowing he's out there." The media reaction was intense. Headlines screamed about the 40-year-old virgin actor turned attempted killer. Entertainment outlets replayed clips of his comedic roles alongside chilling mugshots. It was a collision of Hollywood make-believe and real-life horror. Beebe channeled her pain into advocacy. she began speaking about domestic violence, pushing for stronger protections for victims. Her story became a cautionary tale, not just about one man's rage, but about a justice system that sometimes prioritizes rehabilitation over the safety of survivors. Today, Malil lives under parole restrictions, his Hollywood career long dead. Kendra Beebe lives with scars on her body and trauma that never truly goes away. She says she refuses to let him take her life twice, once with a knife and once with fear. Shelley Malil will never again be remembered for comedy. He'll be remembered as a man who turned his jealousy into attempted murder, and as proof that the most terrifying monsters in Hollywood aren't the ones playing villains. Sometimes they're the ones playing clowns.
So when someone's being authentic, you get the feeling that not only that there's a person there in the moment, but somehow you reach into their very essence and you meet a unique individual.
I don't know why, that makes me want to cry. It's beautiful. Sorry.
She was once the sweet girl next door character on the hit TV show Smallville. Millions of fans knew her as Chloe Sullivan, the loyal best friend to Clark Kent. But off-screen, Allison Mack was living a double life so disturbing it shattered her career and left her forever tied to one of the darkest cults in modern American history. The story begins in the early 2000s, when Mack was riding high on her Smallville fame. She had money, adoration, and a promising Hollywood career. But in 2006, she was introduced to a man named Keith Raniere, the leader of a so-called self-improvement organization called NXIVM. To outsiders, NXIVM looked like a business coaching group, offering workshops on personal growth. Inside, it was something much more sinister. Raniere presented himself as a genius, a philosopher, a problem solver, even a savior. In reality, he was a manipulator, running a secret inner circle that preyed on women. And Mack, who entered the group at first as a student, quickly rose through the ranks to become one of Raniere's most loyal lieutenants. By 2015, Mack was fully entrenched. She wasn't just attending seminars, she was recruiting women into a secret subgroup called DOS, short for Dominus Obsequious Sororium, Latin for Master over Slave Women. The name itself revealed everything. Members were told they were joining an elite sisterhood of empowerment. In truth, they were being groomed for control, abuse, and exploitation. Mack became the face of recruitment. She targeted women who admired her from Smallville, pitching them the idea of joining a secret sorority that would unlock their potential. Once inside, the reality was far darker. Women were required to give collateral, explicit photos, personal secrets, or damaging information as blackmail to ensure silence and obedience. They were branded with a cauterizing pen, seared into their skin with a symbol that, when turned sideways, revealed the initials of Keith Raniere. Some testified later that Allison Mack was present during the branding ceremonies, even instructing women to feel the pain as part of their so-called initiation. What makes Mack's role so shocking is how far she went. She wasn't just a follower. She actively worked to tighten Raniere's control. Prosecutors revealed that she helped dictate diets for women, sometimes as low as 500 calories a day. She allegedly ordered them to have sex with Raniere, praising obedience and shaming hesitation. The illusion of empowerment was shattered in 2017 when the New York Times published a bombshell expose. Former members went on record, describing the branding, the blackmail, and the psychological torture. The story exploded across the world. In 2018, federal agents raided NXIVM's headquarters in New York, and soon after, Allison Mack was arrested. Her mugshot stunned fans. The once wholesome star was suddenly facing charges of sex trafficking, forced labor conspiracy, and racketeering. In court, prosecutors painted her as a manipulator who used her fame and charm to lure women into Raniere's control. The details horrified the public. This wasn't just a cult. It was Hollywood celebrity power weaponized against vulnerable people. At first, Mack appeared ready to fight the charges. But by 2019, facing decades in prison, she broke. She pled guilty to racketeering and racketeering conspiracy. In a tearful statement, she admitted her actions and said, "I believed Keith Raniere's intentions were to help people. I was wrong. I now recognize this was the biggest mistake and regret of my life." In 2021, Mack was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. The judge noted her cooperation with prosecutors against Raniere. She had provided key evidence that helped convict him. That cooperation spared her from a longer sentence, but victims described her apology as hollow. One survivor said, "She branded us, she stopped us, she broke us, and now she gets to walk free in a few years." Meanwhile, Raniere received a far harsher punishment, 120 years in prison. But Mack's name remained forever tied to his crimes. She served her time quietly at a federal prison in Dublin, California, the same facility where Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos would later serve her sentence. In July 2023, Mack walked free after serving just 2 years. News cameras followed her release, but she slipped away without interviews or public statements. Since then, she has lived in near total silence, avoiding the spotlight she once craved. Her career is gone. No one in Hollywood wants to touch her name. What makes Allison Mack's downfall so disturbing isn't just her crimes, it's the transformation. How did a young actress, adored for playing a loyal friend on screen, become the enforcer of a sadistic cult? Was she brainwashed by Raniere, or was she a willing architect of destruction? That question continues to divide public opinion. What cannot be denied is the damage. Allison Mack's story is one of the most jarring collapses in modern television history. And even though she's free today, her name will never again mean Smallville. It will always mean Nexium, the cult that branded women, and the actress who helped lead them inside.
Coretta Scott King. You know who that is? That's Martin Luther King's wife. Michelle Obama. Barack Obama's wife.
I know, I'm not, I shouldn't have gone out, I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm a great man. A great man. I am doing great things.
For a brief moment, Jonathan Majors looked unstoppable. He had gone from indie darling to Marvel's next big villain, cast as Kang the Conqueror, a central figure in a billion-dollar cinematic universe. He was praised for his raw performances in Lovecraft Country, Creed 3, and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Critics called him the future of Hollywood, but in less than a year, it all came crashing down. The fall of Jonathan Majors wasn't a slow decline. It was a sudden public collapse, triggered by a single night in New York City, a night that left his career in ruins, and his name forever stained by headlines about assault and harassment. It was March 25th, 2023. Majors was in Manhattan with his then-girlfriend, Grace Jabari, a British dancer and movement coach. According to prosecutors, an argument began inside a car after a night out. Jabari accused Majors of flirting with another woman, and the tension boiled over. In the backseat, she alleged, Majors struck her, twisted her arm behind her back, and left her with cuts, bruises, and a fractured finger. The driver of the car later testified that he heard screaming and saw the struggle escalate. CCTV footage later showed Jabari chasing Majors after the argument, following him for several blocks. Majors went to a bar, then returned home, where he called 911 himself, telling operators he had found Jabari unconscious in their apartment. The arrest made instant headlines. One day, Majors was Marvel's chosen star. The next, he was in handcuffs, facing charges of misdemeanor assault, harassment, and aggravated harassment. His lawyers quickly went on the offensive, releasing text messages between Jabari and Majors that they claimed showed her apologizing and downplaying the injuries. They argued she was the aggressor and that Majors was the true victim, but prosecutors saw it differently. At trial, they presented photographs of Jabari's injuries, testimony from the driver, and audio recordings in which Majors allegedly berated her, the jury didn't buy the defense's story. In December 2023, Jonathan Majors was convicted of misdemeanor assault and harassment. The sentence wasn't prison time. Instead, the judge ordered him to complete a 52-week domestic violence intervention program in Los Angeles. He was also barred from contact with Jabari. But the damage was done. Hollywood moved fast to distance itself. Marvel, which had built its entire multiverse saga around Major's character Kang, dropped him almost immediately. Disney pulled his upcoming projects from development. The US Army yanked a multi-million-dollar ad campaign featuring his voice. He went from being the face of the future to a toxic brand no studio wanted near them. The irony was brutal. Majors had just been on the cover of magazines, hailed as one of the greatest actors of his generation. He had given interviews about legacy, power, and the responsibility of being a role model. But within months, that image was replaced with mugshots, courtroom sketches, and headlines about assault. The trial itself revealed deeper cracks. Witnesses described Majors as controlling and emotionally abusive, painting a picture of a man whose prided behavior contrasted sharply with his public persona. Defense attorneys argued he was being targeted because of his rising fame and that Jabari was exaggerating to destroy him. But the jury's decision made it clear. They believed her side of the story. In the aftermath, Jabari filed a civil lawsuit against Majors, accusing him of a pattern of physical and emotional abuse throughout their relationship. Majors denied it, but the allegations added more fuel to the public fire. Suddenly, his career wasn't just paused, it was on life support. The reaction was polarizing. Some fans insisted he was innocent, claiming the justice system and media rushed to judgment. Others saw his conviction as proof that Hollywood had once again elevated a man who used power and charm to hide a darker side. What makes Jonathan Majors' case so shocking isn't just the crime itself, it's the speed of the collapse. In January 2023, he was the centerpiece of Marvel's future. By December 2023, he was convicted, fired, and disgraced. No other actor in recent memory has fallen this fast from Hollywood's top tier. Majors has already completed the 52-week intervention program ordered by the court. His legal team continues to hint at appeals and possible comebacks. But Marvel has moved on. For an actor once destined to be a household name, the reality is grim. Whether Jonathan Majors ever rebuilds his career is uncertain. What's certain is that his name is forever tied to a single night in New York, a night that transformed him from a Hollywood rising star into one of its most infamous cautionary tales.
Mr. Salling admitted to possessing about 25,000 still images depicting child pornography. Some cases, the victims were as young as 2 years old.
At the height of the hit show Glee, Mark Salling was living the dream. He played Noah Puck Puckerman, the mohawked bad boy who was equal parts charming and rebellious. Millions of fans adored him. His songs trended on iTunes, and his face was splashed across magazines. To the outside world, Salling was a rising star with everything going for him. But behind the fame was a secret so vile that when it finally surfaced, it destroyed not only his career, but his life. The story broke in December 2015, when federal agents raided Salling's Los Angeles home after receiving a tip. What they found wasn't drugs, weapons, or stolen goods. It was a massive collection of child pornography. More than 50,000 images and 600 videos stored on his computer and flash drives. Investigators called it one of the largest collections they had ever seen. The shock was immediate. This wasn't a tabloid rumor. It was federal agents, court filings, and undeniable evidence. Fans who had grown up watching him on Glee suddenly saw him in a new, horrifying light. His mugshot spread across the internet like wildfire. The contrast between his smirking Puck persona and the reality of his crimes striking a chord of disgust. The case took years to wind through the courts, and the details were sickening. Prosecutors revealed that Salling had gone out of his way to hide his stash. using specialized software to conceal files and encrypt data. He even attempted to destroy hard drives before investigators arrived, but they were able to recover the contents. The investigation also revealed disturbing patterns in his personal life. Years earlier, an ex-girlfriend had sued him for sexual battery, claiming he forced her into unprotected intercourse. That lawsuit had ended with a settlement, but now, in light of the federal charges, it painted a darker picture of his behavior. Facing decades in prison, Salling eventually entered a guilty plea in 2017. He admitted to possession of child pornography involving prepubescent minors, one of the most serious offenses under federal law. In court, prosecutors prepared to recommend a sentence of 4 to 7 years in prison, followed by 20 years of supervised release. They also mandated that he register as a sex offender for life. But Mark Salling never made it to sentencing. On January 30th, 2018, just weeks before he was due to face the judge, he was found dead in a riverbed near his home in Sunland, California. The cause was suicide by hanging. He was 35 years old. His death shocked Hollywood, but it also divided public opinion. Some former colleagues expressed sympathy, calling his life tragic and saying they wished he had found help. Others were furious at the attempt to humanize him, reminding the public that his crimes had victims who would never get justice. One victim's attorney said bluntly, "The world is better off without him." The aftermath was messy. His former Glee castmates largely stayed silent, though a few posted cryptic messages about pain and mistakes. His fans were left grappling with the whiplash of reconciling the character they loved with a man who had betrayed every ounce of trust. And for the entertainment industry, it was yet another reminder of how Hollywood fame can mask horrifying truths. The case also raised questions about Glee's so-called curse. In the years since the show ended, multiple cast members faced scandal or tragedy, from Corey Monteith's overdose to Naya Rivera's accidental drowning. But Salling's fall was different. It wasn't bad luck or misfortune. It was the exposure of who he really was. For fans, it was a bitter lesson. Sometimes the people you idolize on screen are nothing like the roles they play.
You were in conversation to be the first black Spider-Man.
You
lost the deal because of the allegations.
Everybody left my side. Do you understand how it feels to be lonely as hell in jail for something you did not do?
So right.
Like an animal. And they told the media that I'm an animal, and the media believed it. I'd rather be broke with the truth than be rich with a lie. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that.
Carlin Rashad Walker, better known as KR, once looked like the next big multi-hyphenate in Hollywood. He had roles in films like Superfly and Kings, appeared in music videos alongside A-list rappers, and even built a name in the hip-hop scene as a rapper himself. To his fans, he was young, stylish, and rising fast, a symbol of ambition paying off. But behind the flash and fame was a predator. By 2018, whispers about KR's private life had turned into police reports. Women who thought they were meeting him for professional opportunities, modeling shoots, music video auditions, or acting gigs, began telling stories that followed a chilling pattern. According to prosecutors, Walker used his rising fame as bait, luring women with promises of industry connections and assaulting them once they were isolated. The scope of his crimes was staggering. By the time the case reached trial, more than 30 women had come forward with allegations stretching back years. The victims ranged in age from aspiring models barely out of the teens to young actresses chasing their first big break. Many described being contacted by Walker through social media, where he flaunted his celebrity connections. Once they agreed to meet, the encounters followed the same playbook. Walker would promise career opportunities, sometimes at photo shoots or private parties. But once the women arrived, those promises dissolved into fear. In courtroom testimony, multiple victims said Walker overpowered them physically, ignoring their pleas to stop before brutally raping them. He wasn't a household name, but he was visible enough in the entertainment world to make his lies believable. For young women desperate to get a foot in the door, his clout seemed legitimate. Prosecutors said he weaponized that ambition against them. The investigation gained momentum in 2018 when Los Angeles police arrested Walker after multiple women reported him. Detectives uncovered a chilling pattern. Some victims had been left with injuries. Others describe how he pressured them into silence, bragging that no one would believe them because of his connections. At trial, prosecutors presented testimony from more than a dozen women. Their accounts were eerily similar. Defense attorneys tried to portray Walker as a victim of his own fame, a young star targeted by women seeking payouts or publicity. But the sheer consistency of the testimony dismantled that argument. Jurors heard story after story, each one echoing the last. In April 2022, the verdict came down. Walker was convicted of multiple counts of rape and sexual assault involving 3 separate women. The judge sentenced him to 50 years to life in prison, effectively ending his career and his freedom. The courtroom scene was emotional. Survivors wept as the verdict was read, describing relief that their voices had finally been heard. Prosecutors called him a serial predator who had shown no remorse. The judge emphasized the cruelty of his actions and the manipulation involved, saying he had used his status to take advantage of vulnerable women. Even after sentencing, Walker continued to proclaim his innocence. In a jailhouse interview, he claimed he was framed, insisting that the women had lied to destroy him. He maintained that the justice system was biased against black men in Hollywood and that he was a victim of ambition gone wrong. But his words rang hollow in the face of the overwhelming evidence. The reaction outside the courtroom was just as intense. The entertainment industry, still reeling from the Me Too movement, pointed to Walker's conviction as another reminder of how fame can cloak predatory behavior. Walker's career, once poised for success, was erased almost overnight. His music was pulled from platforms, his acting roles vanished, and his name became synonymous, not with art, but with assault. Today, Karlan K.R. Walker sits behind bars, serving a sentence that ensures he will likely never walk free again. His victims, meanwhile, live with scars that can't be measured in years. For more than a decade, Michael Jace carved out a steady career in Hollywood. He wasn't a household name, but audiences recognized him. He played cops, security guards, tough guys, the kind of characters that made him a reliable presence on screen. His most famous role was on FX's gritty police drama, The Shield, where he played Officer Julian Lowe, a conflicted LAPD officer struggling with his personal demons. But in 2014, the fiction became reality in the most horrifying way. The man who spent years pretending to uphold the law murdered his wife in front of their children. The crime unfolded on May 19th, 2014, inside the Jace family's modest home in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. Jace, then 51 years old, was married to April Jace, a beloved financial aid counselor at Biola University. She was known for her warmth, her faith, and her devotion to her family. Together, they had 2 young sons, both under the age of 10, but their marriage was unraveling. Friends later testified that April had been contemplating leaving Michael. Financial troubles weighed heavily on the household. Jace had filed for bankruptcy in 2011, reporting more than $500,000 in debt, including unpaid taxes, credit card bills, and car loans. His acting career had stalled after The Shield ended, and with few roles coming in, the pressure at home mounted. On that spring evening, April returned home from her son's baseball practice. She walked into an argument that had been brewing for months. Neighbors later told police they heard shouting. Then came the gunshots. Jace pulled out his personal handgun and shot his wife 3 times at close range. Investigators later concluded that the wounds to her back suggested she was trying to flee when he fired. The cruelty didn't end there. Their 2 sons were present during the killing. In court, prosecutors revealed that Jace deliberately brought the children into the room to witness the shooting. He reportedly told them, "You see what happens when your mum cheats." Though investigators found no evidence that April was unfaithful, the remark showed his mindset: rage, jealousy, and the need to punish. At 8:30 p.m., Michael Jace picked up the phone and calmly dialed 911. His words were chilling in their simplicity. "I shot my wife." When officers arrived, they found April dead on the floor. The case moved quickly. Jace was arrested the same night and charged with murder. During questioning, he admitted to the shooting but insisted it wasn't planned. He described himself as a man pushed to the edge by marital problems and financial stress. Prosecutors weren't convinced. They argued that his actions, forcing his children to watch, shooting April in the back, and calmly calling police afterward, showed intent and cruelty, not a sudden lapse of control. The trial began in May 2016, and it was brutal. The prosecution laid out the evidence step by step. They showed jurors the trajectory of the bullets, proving April was shot while attempting to escape. They presented text messages between April and friends where she voiced fear about Michael's behavior. And then came the most devastating testimony, the couple's sons. Their words brought the courtroom to tears. Even hardened deputies looked shaken as the children described their mother's final moments. The defense attempted to soften the case, arguing that Jace had acted in the heat of passion and should face voluntary manslaughter rather than murder. They painted him as a struggling actor, overwhelmed by debt and personal failure. But prosecutors countered that financial problems do not justify murder, especially in front of children. They reminded the jury of his cold 9/11 cool, not panicked, not remorseful, but matter of fact. On May 31st, 2016, the verdict came back, guilty of second-degree murder. The judge sentenced Michael Jace to 40 years to life in prison. He will not be eligible for parole until he is nearly 90 years old. The aftermath rippled through Hollywood. Colleagues from The Shield expressed shock, saying they never imagined Jace was capable of such violence. For fans, the irony was impossible to ignore. The man who played a cop, sworn to protect, became the criminal. His career ended instantly. His name erased from reruns. His reputation destroyed. Today, Michael Jace sits in California's Corcoran State Prison. His sons are being raised by family. April's legacy lives on at Biola University, where colleagues remember her as a woman of faith and kindness. What makes this case stand out isn't just the brutality, it's the betrayal of trust. Jace played characters who were flawed but often redeemable. In real life, he showed no redemption, only violence, ego, and cowardice.
What do you do with acting?
I do comedy, play bad guys sometimes. Did you see Austin Powers? I played a little role in part 1.
Okay.
You can find me in Wikipedia, believe it or not.
2 guys jam her in the carport. They grab her, throw her in a car, drive her some distance away.
That's bad.
It's very bad. And the DNA tells us it's you.
In 1997, audiences across the world laughed at Joseph Heung-min's son. He played Random Task, the ridiculous villain in Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. His weapon wasn't a gun or a blade, but a shoe, a joke character meant to make audiences howl. But as the world laughed, Joseph's son was hiding a secret so horrific, it makes his goofy on-screen persona feel like a cruel joke today. Because long before he was in Hollywood, Son had committed one of the most sadistic crimes in California history. It happened on Christmas Eve, 1990. A 19-year-old woman in Huntington Beach, California, was walking her dog when she was ambushed by 2 men. They forced her into a car at gunpoint, blindfolded her, and drove her to a secluded golf course. For the next several hours, she was subjected to a campaign of torture. The men beat her, pistol-whipped her, threatened to kill her, and repeatedly assaulted her. When they were finished, they left her naked and bound, dumped on the freezing ground, certain she would die. But she didn't. Somehow, the young woman survived. She managed to stumble to a nearby road where passers-by found her and rushed her to the hospital. Doctors were stunned she was still alive. The attack left her scarred physically and emotionally, and she later testified that it destroyed her ability to ever have children. For years, the case remained unsolved. The victim lived with the trauma, but her attackers vanished into obscurity. Detectives had little to go on. No names, no suspects, just a nightmare crime scene and a survivor desperate for justice. Fast forward to 2008. Joseph Son, by then known for his Austin Powers role, had been arrested on unrelated charges. As part of his booking, his DNA was entered into the national database. That's when investigators got the hit. The DNA matched samples taken from the Huntington Beach victim in 1990. Nearly 2 decades later, the truth had finally surfaced. The goofy, random task was in fact a sadistic predator. When the case went to trial in 2011, the details horrified the courtroom. Prosecutors charged Son with multiple felonies, including torture, a charge that carried a potential life sentence. The victim testified about the hours-long ordeal, describing how Son and his accomplice seemed to enjoy the suffering they caused. She told Joes, "They laughed as they hurt me." Forensic evidence backed her account. DNA linked Son directly to the crime. The jury found Joseph Son guilty of torture. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. At the sentencing hearing, the victim delivered a powerful statement. She said the attack had haunted every aspect of her life, leaving her with chronic nightmares, anxiety, and permanent physical scars. But the story didn't end with his conviction. Son's behavior behind bars proved that violence wasn't just part of his past, it defined him. In 2011, only months into his sentence at Wasco State Prison, Son murdered his cellmate, Michael Thomas Graham, a 50-year-old convicted sex offender. Guards found Graham beaten and strangled in their cell. Son was charged with murder and eventually received an additional sentence of 27 years to life. With that, Son's fate was sealed. He would never see freedom again. His short-lived Hollywood career was erased. His name, once associated with a funny cult comedy, became synonymous with brutality. The survivor of the 1990 attack continued to speak out about the toll it took on her life. Knowing that her attacker had gone on to enjoy even a taste of Hollywood success only deepened her anger.
I had his movie sitting on my rack. I thought, are you serious? He's in my home?
Joseph's Son will die in prison, and he will be remembered not as random task, the man who threw shoes on screen, but as a convicted torturer and murderer, one of the most evil actors ever to come out of Hollywood.
I've heard about you, and you'll be caught soon. I know you will.
I will.
For years, Danny Masterson was best known as Stephen Hyde, the laid-back stoner with the sarcastic wit on that 70s show. He was part of one of the most popular sitcoms of the late 90s and early 2000s. But while the world laughed at his character, Masterson was hiding a much darker reality. By the time his crimes finally caught up to him, the sitcom star's image was shattered forever. The accusations first surfaced publicly in 2017, when multiple women came forward alleging that Masterson had assaulted them in the early 2000s. The allegations gained momentum in the wake of the Me Too movement, which exposed abuse across Hollywood. But these weren't casual claims. They were detailed, harrowing accounts backed by patterns that prosecutors said revealed a serial predator operating within the safety of a powerful organization, the Church of Scientology. According to testimony, Masterson targeted women who were often fellow Scientologists. That connection mattered, because the church had strict internal rules discouraging members from reporting fellow believers to the police. Instead, victims were pressured to stay silent. Prosecutors later argued that this culture of secrecy allowed Masterson to operate unchecked for years. The assaults themselves took place between 2001 and 2003 at his Hollywood Hills home. Women testified that he invited them over for drinks, often insisting they have wine or cocktails. Soon after, they became disoriented or lost consciousness. One woman recalled waking up to find him assaulting her. Another said she was violently attacked and threatened when she tried to resist. A third said Masterson laughed as she begged him to stop. The details were graphic, but the pattern was clear. Masterson allegedly used alcohol and drugs to incapacitate women, then forced himself on them in situations where they were too vulnerable to fight back. And because of Scientology's influence, many of them stayed silent for years, fearing retaliation or ostracism. When the case finally went to trial in 2022, it drew massive media attention. Reporters filled the courtroom, and cameras camped outside the courthouse daily. Inside, the testimony was gut-wrenching. The victims described trauma that had haunted them for 2 decades. One broke down crying as she told jurors how Scientology officials discouraged her from going to the police, instead urging her to write a confession about what she might have done to cause the assault. Masterson's defense team argued that the encounters were consensual. They claimed the women fabricated stories out of regret, jealousy, or pressure from anti-Scientology activists. But the jury wasn't convinced. The first trial had ended in a hung jury, but in May 2023, after a retrial, Masterson was convicted of raping 2 women. The sentencing was severe. The judge handed down 30 years to life in prison, calling Masterson a danger to women and noting his lack of remorse. The fallout was immediate. Masterson was dropped from all projects, his Hollywood career erased overnight. Netflix cut ties with him years earlier, after the allegations surfaced, firing him from The Ranch, where he starred alongside Ashton Kutcher, but the conviction sealed his fate permanently. The scandal also dragged in others. Kutcher and Mila Kunis, once his co-stars and longtime friends, faced public outrage after it was revealed they had written letters to the judge asking for leniency at sentencing. When those letters became public, fans turned on them, accusing the couple of minimizing the crimes. Both later apologized, but the damage to their reputations was real. The case also reignited scrutiny of Scientology. Prosecutors argued that the church enabled Masterson, silencing victims and obstructing justice. Although the church denied wrongdoing, the trial spotlighted its controversial practices, further fueling criticism that it protects abusers within its ranks. Today, Danny Masterson sits in prison, appealing his conviction, but his chances of overturning the verdict are slim. His name, once tied to sitcom nostalgia, is now synonymous with betrayal, abuse, and disgrace. What makes this case so disturbing is the hypocrisy. On screen, Masterson played a character loved by millions, a sarcastic rebel who fans saw as cool and harmless. Off-screen, he exploited power, trust, and a system of silence to prey on women.
There's some talk about one of the reasons you wanted to do this, you wanted to be in the women's jail?
Yeah, I would rather be, because I get along a lot better with female than I do with guys. So if I'm going to be doing time, at least maybe I could do it with females than guys.
Skylar is now legally a woman.
Skylar De Leon was never a Hollywood star, though he tried to be. His only real claim to fame was a tiny role on the kids' show Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, where he appeared briefly as an extra. But despite the lack of a career, De Leon kept up the illusion of being an actor with connections and money. Behind the lies, he was a manipulator, a con artist, and eventually, a killer. His story spiraled into one of the most shocking double murders in California history. By the early 2000s, Skylar De Leon was broke and desperate. He had washed out of acting, struggled to hold jobs, and racked up debt. He was married to a woman named Jennifer Henderson, and together they had a young daughter. But instead of trying to build a future honestly, Skylar started scheming. He was obsessed with money, luxury, and status, things he could never achieve legitimately. In 2004, De Leon and Jennifer set their sights on a couple from Newport Beach, Thomas and Jackie Hawkes. The Hawkes were retirees in their late 50s, known for their adventurous spirit. After years of working and raising children, they had sold their Arizona home, bought a 55-foot yacht named the Well-Deserved, and were living their dream life at sea. They adored their boat but had decided to sell it so they could spend more time with their newborn grandchild. Enter Skylar De Leon, Pretending to be a wealthy buyer, he contacted the Hawks about purchasing the yacht. On November 15th, 2004, Skylar, Jennifer, and another accomplice, Alonzo Machine, met the Hawks at the Newport Harbor dock for what seemed like a routine test sail. The Hawks welcomed them aboard, eager to make a sale. They had no idea it was the last time anyone would see them alive. Once at sea, Skylar and his accomplices launched their attack. Prosecutors later revealed that the plan was cold-blooded. They overpowered Thomas and Jackie, tied them up, forced them to sign over ownership of the yacht, and demanded access to their bank accounts. The Hawks fought back, but the attackers were relentless. Then came the most horrifying part. Skylar and his accomplices dragged Thomas and Jackie to the deck, tied them to an anchor, and threw them overboard, alive. Their bodies were never recovered. And for weeks, Skylar thought he had gotten away with it. He even began trying to access the Hawks' finances, showing up at banks with forged signatures. But detectives grew suspicious. When the Hawks failed to appear for family events, their relatives raised the alarm. The investigation quickly unraveled Skylar's lies. Detectives discovered his mountain of debt, his failing marriage, and his criminal history, including a previous conviction for armed burglary. Phone records, witness testimony, and financial documents tied him directly to the murders. When confronted, one of the accomplices, Alonzo McCain, flipped on Skylar. He told detectives exactly what had happened on the yacht, informing the chilling details of how the Hawks were forced into the ocean. That testimony sealed the case. In 2008, Skylar De Leon was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances. The jury recommended the death penalty. At sentencing, the judge called the crimes so cruel and so depraved that they warranted the harshest punishment possible. But the Hawks weren't Skylar's only victims. Investigators later uncovered another murder tied to him, that of John Jarvie, a man from Anaheim who was found dead in Mexico in 2003. Prosecutors said Skylar lured him with promises of investment opportunities, only to kill him for money. That case added to the mountain of evidence proving Skylar wasn't just a desperate thief. He was a serial manipulator, willing to kill anyone who stood between him and money. Jennifer Henderson, Skylar's wife, was convicted of assisting in the Hawks' murders and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Accomplices were also convicted, with McCain receiving a lighter sentence in exchange for testifying. As for Skylar himself, his life behind bars took another bizarre turn. He came out as transgender, legally changing his name to Skylar Preciado and seeking gender confirmation surgery while on death row. Advocates debated whether this was genuine or another manipulation, but it added yet another layer of notoriety to his story. Today, Skylar sits on death row at San Quentin State Prison. California currently has a moratorium on executions, so he is unlikely to ever face the death chamber. Instead, he spends his life in isolation, remembered not for any acting role, but for sinking a couple into the ocean. What makes Skylar De Leon's case so haunting is the sheer coldness of the crime. Thomas and Jackie Hawks were loving grandparents, ordinary people who had worked hard and earned their dream life. They welcomed strangers onto their boat, trusted them, and paid with their lives in the most terrifying way imaginable. Skylar De Leon may have wanted money, fame, and power, but what he will always be remembered for is betrayal and murder.
We will still be searching for Spanish fly. The old story was if you took a little drop, no, it was on the head of a pin.
That's right.
And
Drop
you put
it in
in
a
the drink.
Coca-Cola. Don't matter.
It doesn't make it, and the girl would drink it, and
she's yours.
Hello, America.
For decades, Bill Cosby was untouchable. He was the comedian who broke barriers in the 1960s, the sitcom star who became America's dad in the 1980s, and the man who built an empire on clean humor, education, and family values. His face was on Jell-O commercials. His name was taught in media studies courses, and his show was hailed as one of the most important in television history. But beneath that perfect image was one of the darkest double lives in Hollywood. The truth came out slowly, then all at once. More than 60 women accused Cosby of drugging and sexually assaulting them, stretching back over 5 decades. They weren't strangers. They were aspiring actresses, models, employees, and even friends. And the way he operated was disturbingly consistent. Victims testified that Cosby would invite them to his home, a hotel, or a party. He offered them a drink, a pill, or both, often saying it was medication to help them relax. Within minutes, they lost consciousness or became paralyzed. The next thing they remembered was waking up disoriented, with Cosby assaulting them, or the aftermath of an attack already done. The pattern was so specific, so repeated, that prosecutors later said it could not have been coincidence. The first public crack in Cosby's empire came in 2004, when Andrea Constand, an employee at Temple University, accused him of drugging and assaulting her at his Philadelphia home. She reported the incident to police, but prosecutors initially declined to pursue charges, citing lack of evidence. Instead, she filed a civil lawsuit. During that case, 13 women were prepared to testify that Cosby had done the same thing to them. Facing mounting pressure, Cosby quietly settled for millions of dollars in 2006, without admitting wrongdoing. For years, the settlement buried the story. But in 2014, comedian Hannibal Buress called Cosby a rapist during a stand-up set. The clip went viral, sparking renewed interest in the allegations. One by one, women began stepping forward publicly, some using their real names for the first time. By the end, more than 60 accusers had come forward. The stories had chilling similarities. Former model Janice Dickinson said Cosby drugged and assaulted her in 1982 after promising to help her career. Actress Barbara Bowman described being manipulated and attacked by him when she was 17. Many victims said they stayed silent for decades because they believed no one would take their word over powerful celebrities. The turning point came in 2015, when newly unsealed court documents revealed Cosby had admitted in a deposition years earlier that he had obtained quaaludes to give to women before sex. The admission destroyed his public defense and gave prosecutors the leverage they needed. In 2018, Cosby was put on trial for the assault of Andrea Constand. The first trial ended in a hung jury, but prosecutors retried him, this time allowing 5 additional women to testify about similar experiences. Their accounts painted Cosby as a serial predator who used his fame, wealth, and charm to cover his crimes. The jury convicted him on 3 counts of aggravated indecent assault. At 80 years old, Bill Cosby was sentenced to 3 to 10 years in prison. The image of him being led out of court in handcuffs was one of the most surreal collapses in entertainment history. But in 2021, the conviction was overturned. Pennsylvania's Supreme Court ruled that a previous non-prosecution agreement should have barred the charges. Cosby was released after serving just 3 years. For his accusers, it was devastating. For Cosby, it was vindication. He immediately proclaimed his innocence and thanked the court for restoring his freedom. Even after his release, Cosby's legal troubles weren't over. In 2022, a California jury found him liable in a civil case brought by Judy Huff, who said Cosby assaulted her at the Playboy Mansion in 1975 when she was just 16 years old. The jury awarded her $500,000 in damages. The verdict reinforced what survivors had said all along. Cosby had been abusing women for decades. The cultural fallout was enormous. Networks pulled reruns of The Cosby Show. Colleges rescinded his honorary degrees. His comedy tours were cancelled. What had once been a legacy built on family and morality was now synonymous with betrayal, manipulation, and abuse. Cosby's defenders insisted he was innocent, pointing to the overturned conviction as proof. But the sheer number of women, the consistency of their stories, and the civil jury's verdict left little doubt for most of the public. His name became one of the most polarizing in America, a man once celebrated for breaking racial barriers and inspiring millions, now remembered as one of the most prolific predators in entertainment. From the sitcom stars who lived double lives to the Hollywood hopefuls who turned into predators, these 10 actors represent the darkest side of fame. They are the entertainers who deceived, the idols who destroyed, and their crimes leave a permanent stain on the industry that once celebrated them. They are, without question, among the most evil actors in Hollywood history. If you found this exploration into these shocking cases compelling, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. And let us know in the comments below which of these stories shocked you the most.